Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm your moderator tonight. I'm here in Tallahassee, Florida, but I work for the Houston Chronicle. I'm the assistant op-ed editor. And I'm the senior producer for Gray Matters, which is our essay collection. And I am here to talk to you guys about what it was like to organize, to mobilize as a Metro 7. And I think it's reading about you. I feel like some things have changed and some things have not changed. So, hello?
Joel Dreyfus.
Hi, I hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to start off with some questions, and you guys can just jump right in and just decide who wants to answer, or I'm just here to listen and we're here to learn. So I guess the first question I have is, was there a specific moment when you were at the Post, or was there an issue that made you realize that you wanted to organize, you wanted to get together and do something?
I'm going to let Leon answer that.
Yeah, go ahead, Leon.
Oh, okay. Well, what is your name? The moderator, what is the moderator's name?
Hi. Did I not even say that? I'm sorry.
No, you didn't.
My name is Ana.
Ana. Okay.
Yes.
Ana. Well, for me, it extended back to the mid-'60s. I started working as a reporter at the Post in '66, and I left in the fall of '68 to take a 2-year leave of absence to teach high school in Kenya in the Peace Corps. And there had been a lot of agitation before I left about making improvements, and the executive editor at the time, Ben Bradley, had promised that improvements would be made. So I left in the fall of '68, and I returned in February '71, and nothing had changed. And I could see that nothing was going to change. There was no direction, urgency, feelings among a number of people that I spoke to about changing the situation where most of the black reporters were piled up on the metropolitan desk. And the foreign desk and the national desk was still what I refer to, and even in sports, was still what I refer to as the white highlands. So, and that was my comment to both Bradley and to the later managing editor, Howard Simons. So I myself felt a need to organize and confront the situation as openly as possible. And I began talking to members of what turned out to be the Metro 7 individually, and we started out with group meetings. So for me, I clearly wanted to start something and to make some changes because nothing was happening. One of the first people I approached was Richard Prince. So let Richard Prince follow on my comments, if he would.
Well, I think Leon told it very well from his perspective. I didn't come till '68.
Get closer to your mic.
Oh, sorry. All right.
We can't hear you. Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is this
better? Yes.
All right. Good. Yeah, I came in 1968, and my recollection is that smaller groups of us were speaking with each other and said to each other, "Oh, you're having that problem also." And we talked to then somebody else, and they said, "Oh, that's just the way I feel." And so the smaller groups became one big group, and we actually invited some other people some other African Americans on the staff to just come and listen to us. But we decided to narrow it down to just the 9 people on the Metro staff, because it was easier to deal with 9 than with other folks. Also, we were all closer in age. We were all single. We didn't have family responsibilities and that kind of thing. So it became easier. Not totally easier, because we ended up going from 9 down to 7. 2 dropped out. But basically, it was it. And you can see when if you ask what prompted all this, our initial list of 20 questions to management is there on the website, the journalism's website, and you can see some of them are overall like, why are there no black people on this desk and that desk? Why does the city editor have no experience in covering the city? And also what happened to individuals. And I'm sure that the individual indignities helped prompt a lot of this.
So one of the things is the 20 questions, they're questions. It's not a list of demands. It's not like we would like more diversity on, you know, the Metro desk. It's an open-ended question, like why are there no black reporters in this section, or why did we not cover this specific event? What were your feelings behind that, to ask them as questions?
Well, the questions went to the heart of the issues that we were discussing, both individually and as a group. And we thought the best way to begin strategically were with the questions. Mm-hmm. And it turned out to be true, because Joe Whitaker, thank you, Dick. Joe Whitaker and I delivered the 20 questions to Ben Bradley on the morning that's on the date of the questions. I think it was sometime in January, I've forgotten. And Bradley immediately was defensive and understood that this was a challenge that he would have to meet. His admonition to me and Joe Whitaker as we left his office that morning, and we got there early because we knew he got in early and most of the editors were not in yet. And he had an open door policy. So we just walked in. And his point was, after he glanced at what was the beginning of our 20 questions, he said, well, don't let this get out of hand. We just looked at him. We just looked at him and left his office. But he knew that something else was coming. That I think at the end of the questions, we indicated that we wanted to meet with him, and if we didn't name Howard Simons, it was understood that Howard Simons would come to that meeting, the managing editor.
That's really interesting. And so you met him at a time where he had time to see you. It wasn't during the middle of the day. He couldn't make an excuse. No.
It was like 9 o'clock in the morning. He was the only editor that got in at 9 o'clock. We knew it. We knew his habits. Most of the reporters and most of the editors came in at 10:30. The stars came in at 11:30. You know, that kind of situation.
That sounds like the life.
Yeah, don't look surprised. Yeah, but
man.
Yeah, so we knew he would be in.
And so how did you come up with those 20 questions? Did you have 50 and you narrowed them down, or did everyone in the group come up with them together? What was that like?
It was a group effort. At that time, remember, we were starting out with 9 and everyone had something to contribute. And that was how we came up with the 20 questions. I don't think we went beyond 20 questions and pared it down. We got to 20 questions. There was also a lot of back and forth, and some disagreed with some of the questions. You know, it was free flowing. We were just getting used to working together and trusting each other. So there was a lot of back and forth about what the questions should and should not contain. We were meeting at Richard Prince's house, at his apartment, and there was a lot of discussion back and forth. It was several hours. So the 20 questions weren't really, we didn't come to the 20 questions that are in that list until after hours of discussion of what our emphasis would be and what the 20 questions would be.
Okay, that's really, I think that's really important. Sometimes I feel like when we organize, or when we try to get more information, we think, oh, we'll just get together real quick and just put all ideas together.
No.
But it's not.
Not if you're going to get into a situation where you know you're going to confront management on racial issues, some of the most sensitive issues in the American social system. You know, and then also there was a fear that we would be fired. So that was also part of it, what was going on. People were also nervous, and that was the reason, one of the the first person to drop out. He dropped out because he saw it detrimental to himself, and he was one of the few who had a wife and children.
Mm.
So he didn't, after he realized that this was going to be long term and in confrontation with management, he said, well, I've got to do it another way. And he dropped out.
I think that's still definitely a fear that we all have, especially now. Another question I have is, in my experience, white allies in the newsroom have come up to me and told me that they support me or, support people of color, but I don't really know what that means or what they can do if they're not really in a position of power, like an editor, right, who can actually make these kind of big decisions. Did you have any white coworkers that helped, and what did they do? What was your experience with that?
We were very secretive. We didn't really engage the whites until we became public.
Right.
At least that's been my experience. Until the whole thing became public, there was no really engagement with whites in the newsroom. And then there was a lot of anger on the part of the white staff. Several of them came up to me and accused different members of the 7. By the time we became public, we were down to 7. And we had a press conference. The morning we filed our complaint with the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Several whites came up to me in the newsroom, people that I was friendly with, to complain to me that not everyone in the 7 were reporters. And I said, well, among those who you think are reporters, what do you think should happen? And they were sort of lost with responding to me because they hadn't thought that far ahead because they were responding angrily.
Interesting.
So there wasn't any great solidarity. The solidarity came from the older black staff members, editors mainly, and a columnist, a couple of columnists, who we had not included because they were significantly older than us and had families to support. But they were later organized into a meeting by management of the Post to really they were trying to get the older black journalists in the newsroom to go against us. And they didn't realize when they all came in that meeting, they all vocalized support for us and challenged management. Every time management had something critical to say about us, they refuted the criticisms. And management Bradley, I don't think, had anticipated that.
Let me add something. Oh, go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I was going to add that I discovered a couple of years ago at a funeral of one of our colleagues, one of the white reporters, Nick Kotz, who was on the national desk, told me that some of the white reporters on the national desk had seen us going in and out of Bradley's office and wanted to know what was up and what they should do about it. And I think they mentioned it to Bradley, and Bradley told them, mind your own business. That was the end of that.
That sounds like him. It was probably profane. It was probably, you cleaned it up, Dick. It was probably profane.
Okay, next question.
Well, I kind of want to ask a follow-up to that. Was there anything that you didn't expect? Like, an effect or like something that happened as a result of this in the newsroom that you didn't expect?
No, I can tell, Dick, that we anticipated that they would try to identify a leader among the 7 of us. Even when we were 9 or when we got down to 8, they would always, when we were negotiating with Bradley and Simons, they would always try to identify a leader. So we always switched up when we met with them as to who the spokesperson was at that particular time. So there was no leader identified. And when we were interviewed, I remember being interviewed by Time Magazine, and they again wanted a leader identified. I said, there is no leader. It's a group effort. And we anticipated that they would play that game, and we were not going to be a part of that. Right. That came from us covering civil rights many of us that covered in following civil rights, we all knew what were the pitfalls that we had to avoid.
And not only that, but we, it's important to understand that we were very strategic about what we were doing. There was we kept changing spokesmen for every meeting. When we said what we had to say, we didn't stick around to discuss it and argue and all that. We said, thank you very much, went back and then spoke some more among ourselves about what the next move was.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, we had a lawyer named Clifford Alexander, who Leon brought into it. And he was also very strategic in giving us advice, which we took. And, we tried to anticipate what they would do, but, it didn't make much difference because we weren't going to do anything right then anyway. We were always, everything we did, we took back to the group and then decided what our next move would be. Sometimes, as a matter of fact, we had to meet more than once in the same day because we got a response that we weren't anticipating. So we had to get together to say, okay, what do we do with this? So, it's important to say we were not impulsive as management expected we might be.
Okay.
And we were very deliberative and strategic.
Okay. Yeah, so it sounds like you guys got back and forth, and was it written or did they just tell you? Like, was everything, did you make sure to get everything in writing?
Yes.
Okay.
And you can, and as I said, the viewers can see the whole correspondence on our website.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's on the Facebook page, right? I believe
that's on the journalism's page, journal-isms.com. And at the top, you will see a row, and one of them says Washington Post Metro 7.
Right. Okay. Yes, that's linked on the event. So,
good.
Yeah. So my next question is some of the issues that you had when you were, at the Washington Post in the 70s are still issues that people of color and other minorities in newsrooms experience today. Do you have any advice for journalists who are going through these discussions in their own newsrooms?
Go ahead,
Well,
Ron.
go ahead. My own feeling is that now is the time to strike. I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago with someone else too. Given everything that's happening in the society now and the relatively broad acceptance about the racism in American society that has erupted since the death of George Floyd, and the participation of so many young white people and old people too, because you have grandmas out protecting the demonstrators in Portland, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
That this is the period where where people who will want to make a change be prepared to confront management. The Washington Post, for example, is trying to get ahead of the game or ahead of any confrontations by appointing appointing a managing editor in charge of diversity and inclusion, a black woman, and listing a number of hires of minority members who will be hired to come into the newsroom as reporters, and hopefully put some people on promotion tracks. But now is the time to make your unhappiness known and to really confront management. I firmly believe without confrontation, there will be no change. People don't change out of the goodness of their hearts, and power only yields to power. And confronting power publicly is a form of power.
Can we write that somewhere? Can we put that on something like a bumper sticker? That was good.
You can.
That was really That was awesome. Yeah, these conversations are happening a lot in newsrooms everywhere, and you guys kind of set up like a blueprint of how to do it, and so I think there's a lot that we can learn, right, on the way that we can confront power to get answers. Results are a different story, but answers are, there's something.
Well, I would look for results. I would really aim for results. And if I'm going to go out and confront someone, particularly on the issue of systemic racism, I would be looking to make change. I don't want answers. I want change. You know, we demanded they wouldn't live up to it, and they said it would be too expensive. And we listed a demand that 35% of all positions in the newsroom be African American. And Bradley complained it was too expensive. And where did we get that figure from? Well, the figure came from the metropolitan population of Washington, D.C. was 35% black. And that's where the figure came from. So we felt that since the Post called itself a metropolitan newspaper, that's what it should be. Then they accused us of trying to institute quotas. So it's all kind of back and forth. Dick, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just going to say that the population, 35% was of the area, the metro area, which the Post
metropolitan area, right?
Right, and the city itself was 70% black at that time, and that's one of the reasons why we were concerned about who was in charge of the District of Columbia coverage. Was a person who had not covered D.C. and lived in Maryland. So yeah, that's the business about the quotas was really what they finally threw in our faces. And Bradley said, the only quota we're going to have here is a quota on quality. and one of the things one of the things
he also complained that it would be how expensive it would be.
Right. Okay.
That Catherine Graham would fire him.
I didn't hear that one. But one of the things that's interesting about all of this is that time has proven us right in so many ways. I remember being told, well, we don't have evaluations here. And now, of course, they have evaluations. And
yeah.
right.
Yeah, evaluations are
right.
necessary. Yeah.
Right. And the business about the percentage, I was just looking over the demands made by the Black Caucus of the LA Times, and they also listed percentages of people they want of African Americans they wanted in their newsroom. So this latest issue here of having a managing editor for diversity and inclusion is, miles from their position in 1972, and has a potential of really solving a lot of problems, because one of the enduring issues that's in many newsrooms and was the fact that we had nobody at the top who understood what we were trying to say, and it's more than that. It goes to what is news, the definition of news, who gets to define what the news is, and who gets to put whatever spin there might be. One of the guys who worked at the Post after we left wrote a piece for a local weekly. His name is Bob Hinton, which some people might remember. And he talked about how the white male heterosexual mindset pervaded the newspaper. And if you don't fit into that mindset, then you're not going to make it. And so that's what we were up against. It's not just a discrimination of race, but a discrimination of thought. In other words, you really need to be thinking like we think about these things, about what's news and what's not news and that kind of thing. I'll give you an example recently that just happened. There was a guy who I actually have a better example, but I'll stick with this one. There was a guy who just died who was leader of a singing group in Washington, D.C. And most people in D.C. knew of him, but people outside of D.C. did not. So I took this obituary idea to somebody in the style section, since they deal with entertainment. In fact, it was a person who just got promoted to managing editor, and she said, "Okay, fine, I'll get this over to the obit desk." And the obit desk just let it sit there, because first of all, they're not familiar with what DC people are familiar with, and it didn't fit their definition of news. Now, if you have somebody, the same person in a position who's over all those desks, who says, this is news, let's run this, it'll get run. But that wasn't the case, until yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
You dropped out.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, good. Did you hear what I was saying about the Obit saga?
No.
Okay. Well, I'll give you another example that's just as horrifying, and that was when Dick Gregory died, and the Post ran an obit, which was wonderful. But the next day there was a big funeral service in Prince George's County. Thousands of people attended, including the sons of Martin Luther King and the daughters of Malcolm X, and lots of important people. Bill Cosby, I think, came out of wherever he was to attend, and then the next day they had a march up U Street going up to Ben's Chili Bowl, and this also attracted another crowd. And the Pacifica station, you know about Pacifica in Houston, carried the whole service live. There was not a word about it in the Post the next day.
Mm.
And I give the example of the radio station. If the editor had been listening to the radio station, the editor would have come into the office and said, "Oh, I just heard about this on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
Where's our story?"
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have people who are plugged in like that,
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't happen. And then the ultimate was when I write a column about diversity issues in the news business. So I asked the Post for an explanation as to why this wasn't in the paper. And they said, well, it started at 4 o'clock, and that was too late for our deadline for Sunday, which, of course, was ridiculous since we're now a 24-hour operation. But it just shows
Yeah, it can go online. That doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it shows you what difference it can make to have somebody at the top,
Mm-hmm.
not have to go through all that, especially with the definition of differing definitions of news. And I'll say something else about that, and that is, it's not simply a racial issue because there was a black person involved in that decision making. It's the culture. And it's important to have people who can change that culture so that people understand that you don't have the only definition of news. Okay, that's it.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Why is the Society of Professional Journalists interested in this now?
That would be for the leaders to answer. I can answer for myself. I'm not one of the SPJ leaders, but I am a young journalist, if you're interested. I'm interested because it's selfish, but I've experienced it and I don't know what to do, right? I guess this is gonna go on the record, it doesn't matter, I guess. But like, I was paid less than my white male counterparts and I have a master's degree and they were younger than me and they only had a bachelor's degree, right? Or things that I saw that I said, hey, let's maybe take out this lifestyle out of LGBTQ because it's not a lifestyle and that promotes a different, that promotes something that's not true, right? So, and then I get pushback from that. Or, the word illegal immigrant, can we say undocumented immigrant instead of illegal immigrant? Things like that. So when I was asked to moderate this panel, I said yes because I want to know. You guys did it. You organized, you mobilized. And as a young woman, I need to listen and I need to learn. And so for me, just listening to how you guys did it, even the idea of they were waiting for you to be impulsive, that's something that's really important because sometimes I get so angry and I feel impulsive, right? I just want to make a decision or say something. And so things like that are really important for me to listen and for me to learn. So that's why I'm interested in it and interested in your story. As far as SPJ though, they can answer their own.
So this is Adam Senator. I'm the president of the New England SPJ. And, I was really interested in this because, diversity in newsrooms is such an, or the lack of diversity in newsrooms is such an important issue, because it doesn't, it impacts everything from the news people receive to how stories are framed to, what does and doesn't get covered. And there's a lot of talk about the lack of diversity in newsrooms today, but I think, from learning from the Metro 7, you guys have been fighting for this for a really long time. I mean, this goes way back to the early 70s, and the Metro 7 were pioneers in sort of initiating this conversation and helping to promote diversity in newsrooms and telling people why this is an important issue. So I think that it's important that people know the work that the Metro 7 has done and the legacy of the Metro 7, and sort of where things can go from here.
I was curious because the Washington Post was the third newspaper that I had worked at. And it wasn't until I got to the Post that there was a critical mass of minority journalists who could make a difference. And that seems to be the case now. One of the things that I think surprised most of us when we listened in to the Washington Post, the current Washington Post minorities, is that there were more people who were involved. I think Leon pointed out that there was just a handful of us when we made our noise.
Do you think that the people at the Post now have sort of picked up on the legacy of the Metro 7?
I'm not aware of. Richard could probably tell you better than I could. I'm not aware that they're even aware of the Metro 7. I'm not. Dick laughs, but ask me.
Well, I do think that you have a point there. I think it's we've gone through a number of phases since the 70s. One was the phase of the 80s, where the movie Wall Street was popular then, in which the theme was something about the me generation and careerism. And black people and a lot of black journalists were caught up in that as well. So that they were more interested at that time, at least not everybody, of course, but a lot of people were more interested in their own careers and what would further their careers than in doing some of the, having kind of mindset we had coming through the 60s. So there was that. And then, of course, one of the epitome of that was the Janet Cook case, which I don't know if people are aware of that. But that was a young black woman who fabricated a story called Jimmy's World about a little boy who shot himself up with heroin. And the only reason she did all that was because of the pressure to give the editors what they wanted. And that's where her head was. And I think there was a lot of that went on, through the 70s, into the 80s, and maybe into the 90s. Now, I don't know. I think Leon is right that a lot of people don't even know about the Metro 7, and a lot of people in general, just like Americans in general, are ahistorical in so many ways. They don't care about the past. They think that they got there by themselves and they know the way to success. And so that's, but, as I said, it's not everybody who feels that way. And I think the proof of that is that in so many newsrooms, people are organizing. And I think that they are starting the same way we did, which is people talking to one another and discovering that they are feeling the same issues.
So I think I want to, so one of the things you said, Richard, was you gave some examples of things that you've seen or that you've experienced where if we had someone, in a position of power, that they wouldn't have happened, right? If we had someone with a diverse mindset, right? So one of the things that we've talked about is, striking right now. As civil rights are, at the forefront of our, of our news, this is the time to, list our demands. But what do you think of the coverage of the civil rights issues that we've seen, from national media? Have you seen anything that that you liked, that you thought, hey, this was really great coverage? They really did a good job. They got someone on the ground. They covered it holistically. Or have you seen any missteps that where you're like, this wouldn't have happened if someone had been a part of the community, someone had been present in the community?
The New York Times 1619 project was significant. Now, that would not have happened in our generation, I don't believe. And its impact was quite significant. Got the senator from Arkansas, Tom Cotton, upset.
Yes.
And I think that was a significant development. It was published before the George Floyd murder, and all of these things seem to be coming together at a time, particularly with the Times estimated that this movement in reaction to the murder of George Floyd was the largest movement in American history. They estimated a top figure of 26 million participants, much more than the civil rights movement, which had hundreds of thousands, and they're saying 26 million. So this is a significant period, right, that we're living in. And my hope is that it will propel people to come out and vote against Donald Trump, which I find is an existential threat to the future of this country for everybody. Well, I find him to be an existential threat. But this is a very significant turning point. Now, when you talk to us, we were out in the street and staying up late at night and thinking and strategizing, and now we're all in bed about 9 o'clock. Even if Ron and Richard deny it, they're in bed by 8:30.
You're right. You're absolutely right. The question that I have about the coverage has to do with the stories that will tell me why it is that white cops are more afraid of black men now than ever before. Each one of those stories that happened at the beginning of the spasm of violence seem to involve a white cop who was afraid of a black man. In Atlanta, and I've yet to see any stories about this yet, here are two white cops who couldn't hold a black man down who they determined was drunk. Obviously, these are cops who don't know how to be cops anymore. And nobody's sort of written about that. There's been a lot of coverage, but from the cops that I know, and I met a lot of cops when I was at the Post and at other papers, they laugh at policemen now because they're incapable of really being cops. Nobody's written about that that I've seen.
I will point out the coverage of the coronavirus, in my opinion, has been remarkably better than.
I'm sorry, Dick, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, the coverage of the coronavirus and the impact on people of color, I think, has been commendable compared to what happened before. I mean, everyone knows that the impact is worse on blacks and Latinos. And I think that people in the media now are sensitive enough to go look for, to document all the various ways that the George Floyd case has affected businesses, schools, everything, around the world. So they're big on that. One of the things that's also evolving, I don't know if we're there yet, is trusting the community. It used to be the case that there would be drive-by coverage of the community and believe the cops. And then finally in Ferguson, in 2014, there was a report that came out in which they said, the community people were right all along. People are being arrested and fined just to fill the coffers of the city and things like that. And so that sort of awakened the media, and of course all the lying that's been uncovered and the rise of body cameras has gone a long way to changing the mindset of the media, not completely yet, but to believing the people.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talk about like believe women, believe the community, right? And if we had been listening from the get-go, when the coverage would have been a lot different. Like if we had been listening during the HIV crisis and how it disproportionately affected, different groups of people. And I think that's a really good point. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to open it up for questions in the chat, so you can ask some questions. I'm going to ask one. It's about the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. You guys filed the complaint with them. Was that the first time that was done by members of the newsroom? And what was that like?
Leon knows more about that than anyone.
Well, it was the first time any journalist filed a complaint with the EEOC Commission in terms of racial discriminatory employment. I believe that was the first. And we did it because I had grown up in the same housing complex in Harlem, in New York, with Clifford Alexander, who by '72 was a prominent lawyer in Washington, D.C. So I approached him to represent us pro bono, that's without fee, because he was with some outrageously expensive law firm called Arnold and Porter. And he agreed to do it. And he had been the director of the EEOC at one point before this. So he understood the ins and outs of the law involving criminal discrimination. He knew that the EEOC would have to go through a process of investigating the Washington Post and then issuing a report. And hopefully after the report, getting the Post to sit down with us to negotiate a settlement, because we had reached a stalemate. The Post was not going to fulfill our demand for 35% Black representation in every job category in the newsroom. And we weren't backing off that request. So for us, it was an excellent strategy, because the morning that he filed the complaint with the EEOC, we held a press conference. And that's where, if you look at Dick's site, you'll see a photo of us, all seven of us.
That's the photo of all of you guys dressed up like super snazzy, right? Like with like the jackets and like y'all look so good.
A press conference in your jeans? No. No, we dressed up, and my beard was all black then. Whenever I see that photo, but so we held a photo at the AME Metropolitan Church, which is an historical Black church. Frederick Douglass attended it, and it was 1 block away from the Washington Post, the church was. And then after we had our press conference, we went back to work. We didn't goof off. We went back to producing the stories that we were working on. And all of that was significant. Years later, I just want to bring this up. Years later, Howard Kurtz, who recently, I think he stepped down or was accused of something at Fox News. He then was the media critic at the Washington Post. And this is sometime in the 80s, because I had been back from Africa for a couple of years, about 86. And he wrote a piece that said the EEOC Commission, he wrote about the Metro 7, and he said the EEOC Commission decided to not pursue a suit. And that was the end of the matter. And I said, no, you have to run a correction, because that's not the case. The EEOC gave us the right to sue the Washington Post. We didn't have the money to do it, but the commissioners voted to give us, this Metro 7, the right to sue the paper. And he said, well, I don't know. My reporting didn't turn that out. I said, well, if you ask someone who was there, or you look at the actual record, you will find that that's the case. And so to give him credit, he did go back and he found out that what I was telling him was right, what he had written was wrong. And he did run some, it wasn't a correction of what I was requesting. It was some, Bill Elson wrote it, some modification of the story or something. But at any rate, I just wanted, myself, I wanted the record to remain that the EEOC found the Washington Post a discriminatory employer. We filed our complaint in March and they came out with their report in November. And now I'm at the Post, I left the Post in '98, but in mid-'90s, now I remember we filed our complaint in 1972. 27 years later, in the mid-'90s, people, white males, several white males who had been hired, were much younger than I am, complained to me about us filing the complaint in 1972. And I said, well, how do you even know about that? And they said, well, so-and-so told me, or they wouldn't tell me who told them. I said, well, I'm glad to see that it had such a long-range impact. Good.
Right.
So it was a good choice. We made a good choice, I think, yeah. And that choice was really organized by our attorney, Clifford Alexander.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. Also, I can't believe someone wrote a story about it and didn't try to reach out to you guys.
No, he didn't interview any one of us.
That
I
seems,
never heard from anyone.
that's,
Huh?
I said I never heard from anyone.
I teach journalism, I teach reporting classes at the University of Houston, and I would not give that student a very good grade. I'm just putting that out there. You got to reach out to the people that it affects, so yeah. The next question I have is, so what made you want to enter the field of journalism, especially when it was such a homogenous industry that, you know, didn't cover people of color, didn't cover the communities that we come from?
Well, for myself, it was happenstance for me. I was going to Howard during the day and working as a copy boy at the Post at night. And for me, it was an excellent job. It was 6:30 in the evening to 2:30 in the morning. It was indoors. Before that, I had been steam cleaning buildings at night on a scaffold. And that got tired as the weather got cold. But that April, I started that in November of '65, and then that April of '66, the city editor then, the late Stephen Isaacs, approached me about going into the internship program that summer, June of '66. So I asked him how much did it pay, and he just broke out laughing. He said, you know, the people lined up outside to get in here and get into the internship program. And I'm offering you the opportunity. And I said, well, you know, I've got bills to pay and tuition to pay.
Brothers got bills.
Right. So I got bills to pay. That's why I'm working and going to school at the same time. So he told me the salary. I figured what it was, but it was much more than I was earning as a copy boy. And I said, oh, yeah, sure. But then I got into it beginning in June of '66 and really loved it. I didn't come in initially thinking that a great deal about integrating the industry. I knew it was mainly white. When I told my father what my career path was in terms of pursuing a career in journalism, my father asked me how was I going to eat.
Yeah.
He didn't know any black journalists and didn't know of any. And he didn't want me living with him and my mother forever. So I said, well, there are great opportunities here and I'm going to pursue it. So the idea of really working to improve the position of blacks in the industry really began in the '60s, also in that period, because it began before I left in '68. There were sporadic meetings both in Washington and New York City of black journalists trying to organize and put together what eventually became the National Association of Black Journalists, which was organized and put together in 1975.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now,
Okay,
Dick
I
and
think Adam is trying to.
Ron are younger than me. They might have a different approach.
No, I think Adam is trying to wrap this up. So,
Okay.
yeah, And so I want to thank him too. But I want to leave with one final thought, and that is the importance of knowing history. It's very important to have context. You know, when you see these the monument controversy, the Edmund Pettus Bridge controversy, all these things, you need to know that the context of what took place to get us where we are today. And so I wanted, since this is the New England chapter of SPJ, I wanted to make a plea for people to know the history of New England in dealing with African Americans. I saw a lecture by a guy who's written a book on slavery in colonial New England, and it was an eye opener. A lot of people think that New England had nothing to do with slavery. Well, of course, it was just the opposite. New England they were the ones who financed slavery. They're the ones who had the slave ships, and there was a tie-in between slavery in New England and slavery in the Caribbean. And all of this, I think, would be good background for New England journalists to know when they write about racial issues in this part of the world. So that's my bid. Oh, we still have 5 minutes. Okay.
Well, it's okay. I mean, Richard, I think that's a really good point. I went up to school in Boston, and I heard a lot of negative things about the South when I was there, and I said, hey, just a second.
Right.
You're not, we're all, everywhere is at fault here, you know? So,
there was just a story about Maine. I don't know if you saw this, where they finally removed some derogatory racial names from
the Maine Islands.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So I just said, you know, no part of the United States was.
What was Ben Bradley's middle name? I forgot.
Crown and Shield.
Crown and Shield. The Crown and Shields in New England were slave traders.
Yeah, there you go.
I found that out. I pointed that out to Ben. He didn't deny it.
You pointed it out to your boss?
Yes.
Wow.
I said, where does that middle name come from? He said it was on my mother's side. I said, they were slave traders. You out of Greenwood. Oh, yes, they were.
No. Like, no, I agree with you, but like, oh man, that's awesome and intense.
But I like to get
Leon just like to pull Ben's chain.
Yeah, but like, if you said, wow, no, I mean, that's.
And the clue was that he didn't deny it.
True.
He didn't deny it. He didn't challenge me on it or anything, but I had read it. I couldn't wait to get up to him. Yeah, Benjamin Crown and Shield Bradley. Yeah. He's a descendant of slave traders.
Wow. No, that's, if that's okay, Leon, I kind of want to like, I kind of want to like, after this, tell my husband about that. Cause that's like the most, Google, that's such a move. That is Google, like the most awesome move.
Google Crown and Shield.
Okay. I will. I definitely will.
Come on. Right.
Is there anything that you think, is there anything else that you guys would like to say? Anything that you feel like maybe we missed or something that you'd want to point out before we leave? Because we got 3 minutes.
I really want to admonish you that now is the period for you to do the confrontation. Don't put it off. Organize. First they organize and then confront. Because you're not going to achieve any change without confrontation.
It's only taken them 50 years to get to the point where they're ready to confront these.
There's another question here that Lisa Vives has tried to get answered, and that's about the black press. She says, "What about the black press?" And I guess Ron, who's worked in the black press, is chuckling. But you know, the black press was around all this time, but you know, as integration took place, they just couldn't match the salaries and the exposure of the white press.
And they were afraid of us.
Well, go ahead.
I'm going to tell a story out of school. Dick Prince and I went to Baltimore to talk to the people at the Afro, and they said that they didn't want us there because they didn't want us trying to take over their newspaper.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, does that answer your question? Okay.
That's interesting. I know that you know, there's Latino papers out there, but they can't compete with white papers either.
Right. And the black press, a lot of the people in the black press were very conservative and wondering why we were raising Cain over at the Washington Post when we should be grateful. So they really were standing back away from us. When Ron and Richard went to see the Murphys, the owners of the Baltimore, Washington Afro in Baltimore, they were not interested in us coming to work for them at all, because they thought we would be bringing a lot of trouble and challenging the way they covered things and the way they looked at things.
Well, Dick looked like a troublemaker anyway.
Yeah.
Would y'all consider yourselves troublemakers still?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
But good trouble, right? It's good trouble.
All good trouble. All good trouble.
Good.
Yeah, I see Joel Dreyfus in the corner here in the audience.
Well, he turned his mic on for a minute, and then he turned it off again. I don't know what's.
I'd love to hear what Joel has to say.
Maybe he's gotten shy in his old age.
Speaking of troublemaking.
Exactly.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Joel.
What do you think of everything, Joel?
Well, I think it's deja vu all over again. You know, we went through these battles. I always said I was part of the Metro 8.5 because their activism got me hired at the Washington Post. I think I came aboard in '73, and then I took up the mantle, and we raised some more hell together.
Right.
With Ben Bradley, who I also knew about his Crown and Shield slave ship connections.
Right.
but the sad thing is that what we're hearing from this next generation, which is really 2 generations later,
2 generations behind us, yeah,
is the same issues and the same problems. And I think it goes back to not as just how racism is embedded, but cultures. And I've worked in a dozen newsrooms, and I know the difference in culture can be so important, and it's often neglected. And I think you guys have to address that. The other thing I would say is document. We always had statistics, data, numbers, dates when we complained about something. And I think that's what infuriated the management of the Washington Post even more.
Right.
Was that they couldn't accuse you of being emotional. Which isn't just reserved for women.
Sure.
But people of color in general.
That's a stereotype. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think the big difference is that the battle is more public than it has been because of social media and other things that are taking place. Most of our battles were behind the scenes. Very few people knew about them, except when something leaked to the press and got blown up for a hot minute or so.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see Halima has a question. How do we break out of the cycle? And just in brief, I think the American Society of News Editors, which is now the News Leaders Association, has the right idea. They say you have to start at the top and put their priority on newsroom leadership. It flows downhill. I mean, if the boss says, I want this to take place, it takes place. I also worked at the Gannett Company, where Al Newharth was the boss, and he was a diversity advocate, and he put diversity as one of the factors that determined whether you got promoted and got a raise. And so when you start messing with people's income, they do what they're told, and that's why Gannett became one of the reasons Gannett became a leader in diversity. So to answer the question is, start at the top, get people at the top to pass the word down, and we might see some change.
Right. So that's where the confrontation has to take place also. Not with the editors, but at the top editors.
Right.
They have,
the decision makers.
Right. They have to be dragged into the 21st century kicking and screaming.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, sure.
Still in the 18th century.
Yeah, maybe even further back. I don't know, to be honest. But thank you so much for everyone coming. It's really nice to hear from you. It was really, really knowledgeable. I feel a lot more prepared. Yeah, a little bit.
Are you empowered now? Are you empowered now?
Yeah, a little. Yeah, definitely empowered, motivated. And
Good,
also,
we want to read about you in 2 months.
Good trouble.
Oh, you'll see. You'll totally see.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Adam, if that's okay, I guess this is where we end it.
Yeah, we're good to go. Thank you so much, guys. This was the New England chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you all for your participation. We learned so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for having
Thank
me.
you.